Where do you want to sit and where do you want
sit
me?
Here.
Okay.
2 minutes, 4 minutes.
That's chocolate, the computer.
Yeah, we have about 4 minutes, so if you have to go to the bathroom, go now.
Hurry, because you don't want to miss a thing.
It's going to be a long evening.
It's Ed Mallow.
It's not going to be that long.
Ed.
Hello.
Where are you, Goldie?
Hi, Tom.
Where are you, Goldie? You're not at home.
She's in that box right there.
You are?
She's in the box over there.
I'm in my dining room chair where I spend way too much time.
I don't recognize that picture. Maybe
This is my Zoom chair.
that's your Zoom chair.
Zoom chair. Actually, the picture behind me is an old calendar that I got from Israel. And it's, the front piece for each month.
Oh.
And it's a depiction of the holiday celebration for the holiday that occurs in that month.
What a nice thing.
Nice.
Great idea. Great idea.
Probably
Yes, you
30
can
years old.
create unique art for yourselves.
There you go. Whatever it takes these days, so long as it's safe.
Yep.
Anyway.
I know. I never put my picture
From Natalie.
I never put my picture on.
Well, I said that she's
I just don't like it. I like to do whatever I want to do and nobody knows what I'm doing, kind of thing. So I'm in bed.
Yes.
I'm saying I'm laying there.
Susie Q.
I haven't seen you in so long.
It was a huge hit, Shabbos.
Yeah. Oh, welcome. Hey there.
Huge
Hi,
hit.
Susie.
Thank
Good
you.
seeing you. Yes, you too. Hold on. Let me change my name here. Hold on. Okay. Hey, puppy dog.
Talking to. Which puppy?
You could have a bar mitzvah. You could have a bar
mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah.
A bar mitzvah, yes.
Cheryl, are you in your new home?
Oh,
Cheryl, are
yes.
you in your new home?
I am, yes.
And enjoying it, I hope?
I'm enjoying it, yes. Yeah, as it's a riot here. I'm sitting looking out the window. I can see certain elements going on. Straight across from me, there's a party going on. They're wrapping themselves in towels right now.
Nice.
And it's looking overcast. And it's interesting. My temperature in here is probably on the cool side. Out there, it's probably upper 80s. So there's a huge difference. But yeah, there's a good sized gathering over there.
Oh, that's nice. I hope
Silly people. Silly people.
There.
Silly, yeah, a little, exaggerated over there.
Are they masked?
Something we've heard.
I don't see any masks.
Probably not.
I don't see any.
Very silly people.
Yeah.
Denial.
Carol.
I see. Ron. Hello, Barb.
Hi. You could get
It might be a social bubble.
across the way.
It might be a social bubble over there. They're all positive, COVID negative.
But the one thing I do see, there's 2 golf carts over there, and there's 2 people sitting in one and 2 people sitting in another. But keep in mind, too, they're probably about 8 to 10 feet apart.
Okay. They're social distancing.
They are social distancing.
Are they related?
Yes, they are.
Is it husband and wife?
That means the
I would assume that it is.
Cheryl, why don't you turn your camera so we can see?
Oh, could I do that? Pick up my screen and turn it around. I went to it was Labor Day weekend. They had a program going on, and there must have been 50 golf carts parked around this fence. And everybody stayed in their carts. Everybody. They were good 6 feet apart.
Well, then that was all right.
Pardon?
That was okay.
Oh, it's right there. It's up at the top.
We're just waiting for the candor to come back, and
Oh,
I'm here. Are you ready to start?
Oh, you moved. You were up there, and then you moved.
I didn't go anywhere. Is it? But I'll go ahead and mute everybody, and then just Rabbi, give me one moment so I can unmute you. Okay.
I look forward to it.
The 3 dots.
Okay.
You're good to go.
All right. Erev Tov, everybody, and I hope everybody is fine and happy and content. And as I said before, it's a beautiful night here in New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia. A little touch of fall in the air, that's it. So that's the up to the minute weather report from Greater Philadelphia. So we have a little bit to do tonight before we do Havdalah and join the URJ service. And before we leave, the cantor will give you the final instructions on how to access the URJ service. So don't worry. It will all be explained at a touch of a button or a click of a clicker, whatever the case may be. So tonight, as you know, is it's a very special moment within the Jewish time frame. Selichot is usually held the Shabbat prior to Rosh Hashanah. Rumor has it that Rosh Hashanah is Friday night. So we're now within a week of actually doing this, which is probably one of the reasons why I haven't slept much in the last couple of nights, and probably the cantors, if things are true, about the same. So what I want to do tonight with you is explore with you, in essence, part 2. For those of you who are on the Wednesday night class for the Elul class, when we talked about confession as the first part of this conversation about forgiveness and confession, tonight we're going to handle this concept of forgiveness within the context of Judaism. And the night, Selichot, it comes from the Hebrew Slechaf. So for those of you who've been to Israel and you bump into somebody on the Eged bus or trying to line up and you haven't gotten elbowed yet, which is usual, and you're waiting for them to say, excuse me, you'll keep waiting for a long time. And you practice your Hebrew, you'll say Slicha, which means, excuse me, pardon me, forgive me, I bumped into you. So when we get to the service this week, you'll have a couple of prayers, Salachna, Salachti, which carry the concept of forgiveness. So I want to start with this wonderful poem. Alden Solovy, Solovy, is a Israeli. He's actually done a couple of podcasts for me. I think I may have mentioned this to one of the classes back in July. He's probably the preeminent poet, liturgist in Israel. He comes to the United States all the time. And if you ever have an opportunity to hear him, I would suggest you do that. And I'm going to close with one of his other poems. But he wrote this, he sent this out. His website is To Bend Light, to Bend Light. And you can Google him, Solovy. His first name is Alden, Alden. If this stuff fascinates you, I encourage you to do that. So he wrote this for tonight, for Selichot, and it carries with it. It's a good way to introduce. Thanks, Carrie. It's a good way to introduce. So he writes the following, and the name of this poem is called Assembly. And he writes, when the children of Israel assembled before you in holy convocation, we assert the covenant, the promises you made to our ancestors. We claim the right to forgiveness. Vayomer Adonai salachti kidvarecha. And God said, I forgive you as you have asked. When the children of Israel assemble before you in holy convocation, we assert our kinship, the solidarity that we have with our heritage. We claim the responsibility to be a nation of priests. Va'amarta alechem kadoshim tehiyu. Say to them, you shall be holy. When God's love and God's mercy join our holy convocation in breaths, in whispers, and in blast of the shofar, holiness and forgiveness, repentance and love become one. Ki ka amar Adonai, vahitem li la'am, va'anochi ehyeh lachem le'elohim. For God says, you shall be my people, and I will be your God. So this is Alden's introduction to Selichot. We're going to talk a little bit about forgiveness. It's a very difficult subject to talk about. It seems easy, but it's really not. So here's the first question as we started Wednesday night. I'll toss it out to you. And if you want to respond, you're under no obligation. There's no penalty. There's no exam. But, you know, we had this very interesting conversation about some of this because you were very, very good, or the group on Wednesday being very open. How many of you have had a situation where you've, like Jacob and Esau, you've had to ask forgiveness or sought forgiveness for a wrong that was either that you have done or that was done to you? And if so, what process did you use? How difficult was it for you to look at somebody in the eye and say, look, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me? How anxious or anxiety provoking was it for you to wait for somebody who had done something wrong for you and sit by the phone and wait for them to call or meet you and say, look, I really, that was wrong. I'm sorry. And what was going on in your soul? What was going on in your feeling? Anybody want to take a chance at answering either one of those questions? Once, twice? Anybody?
Yes, we have Tom Vick.
Tom, where are you? Oh, there. Oh, Tom, no relation to Michael. You're muted. You're muted.
That was my fault. I think we played on unmuting games together. There we
Okay.
go. He's good.
Okay, no, I am a dog lover. Start out.
Okay.
Let me start. I'm in my God voice. Hold on. Okay, let me start here. Okay, just simply, there's been several things, but one of the things too is when I went to a private school, private high school, it was very much, and it might be because of teenage years or whatever, but very much a pecking order. You know, I got picked on, but then as I went up in classmen, I did picking back. You know, you had to find the other target to deflect and everything.
Right.
And in years later, when I started looking back on it, I had to realize that whatever was done wrong to me is not important. I mean, it is important, but it's not relevant to the fact that I did something wrong to someone else. So at a couple of high school reunions, I went back and I saw some of the people that I directly, let's just put it, I bullied. And I said, I am sorry for what I am sorry for what happened. The only difference I can say is the person I am now would not bully you today. The person, you know, the person you were or the person you are now. All I can say is that you will never get that from me again.
Right.
You know, that was one way to do it. That was one of the better changes. And I mean, I do have a lot of these friends now on Facebook. I probably connect more on social media with them from my past school than I ever would, you know, whatever. But I still do. And I was glad I did it because one of them, or one I can think of off the top of my head, is now a blessed memory. Mm-hmm. But at least I got to say, look, I am sorry for having ridiculed you, because we don't need to do it. It doesn't matter what age I was. I did it. I'm sorry. I only know the person I am today would not do that to you now.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's very profound and very lovely. You know, and it really channels the tradition that you'll see again in the prayer book on Yom Kippur, that the gates of repentance, the gates of forgiveness are always open. They never, there's no statute of limitations, so to speak. And when you mentioned the blessed memory, every clergy person that I know of, without exception, has had situations, especially around a funeral, where somebody will verbalize, either a family member or something, and say, you know, I didn't have a chance to say I'm sorry. You know, this person thought they had more time. I thought I would have a chance, but we ran out of time. And that's so this is all part of this process. Anybody else, Cantor?
Yes, we have Wendy and then Linda.
Okay, Wendy, where are you, Wendy?
I'm here, but I can't unmute.
No, you're unmuted.
I am unmuted.
You just did. You just did.
It's funny you should bring up funerals. After my husband died, somebody said something to me that was, she didn't mean it to be ugly. I overreacted because it was about one of my children, and I lashed out. And it took maybe 2 years of going and seeing this person and really being upset. But I realized that I was really overreacted, and I finally apologized.
Yeah.
And we're never going to be best friends again, but at least I feel that I did the right thing.
Yeah, and just like Wendy and Tom were talking about, the internal feeling of that also helps change the chemistry of a body. Who else is next, Cantor?
It's Linda and then Felice.
Okay, Linda, unmute yourself and take it away.
Okay, mine is sort of different. I have a situation that goes back many years, and I can forgive the person. I cannot forget. And I've been waiting all these years for an apology.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure how to approach it. Do you contact the person and say, gee, how hard is it for you to say I'm sorry?
Well, you know, could you just hold that? Because we're going to actually get to that in about 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's actually a passage I want to share with you about 3 steps of forgiveness in a really wonderful book that's, as you can see, I use it a lot, called The Spirituality of Imperfection. It comes out of the Jewish recovery movement. And it talks exactly, Linda, what you're talking about. So can you just hold on? Because I don't want to bury the lead here, so to speak. And who's next, Kara?
Felice and then Sheila.
Felice.
Yes, here I am. Felice Navidad. Did you say that, Rabbi? Is that what you said? A couple things. I first have a question, and that is, it is wonderful to hear that the gates are always open.
Your gates are always open.
Where does that fit in with the prayer that says the gates are closing?
The gates of Yom Kippur, those gates closed at Nila, but the gates of repentance, of true repentance, there's always an opportunity for repentance. There's always that opportunity. The gates of the high holidays close, and that's why those 10 days are so valuable. And that's a metaphor, but the gates, and my favorite story about this, I may have told you this. If I did, tell me and I'll shut up. But many, many years ago, when I was running the region for the union, we're getting a lot of feedback from a radio someplace. I was contacted by a group of prisoners at Graterford Prison, which is a maximum security state prison outside of Philadelphia. There were 25 men, they're Jews, who wanted to form a synagogue. They wanted to join the URJ. They wanted to formally affiliate with the Reform movement. And we met with them, and I went to visit them in prison, and we talked to them. They filled out all the forms. They did all the right thing. We sent the application up to the North American board, and people said, how can we do this? These are prisoners. They were in there, and your ticket of admission to this prison was murder, or really, I don't know where we're getting that feedback.
It's from Felice. Felice, when I mute you, you have to let me keep you muted, okay?
All right, sure.
Okay.
So Felice, so when we sent this up, We had a scholar, a friend of mine, Bernie Zlotowitz of blessed memory, who actually wrote a tshuva, a question and answer, researching this. And the answer that came back, and the URJ board passed it unanimously, and they've been a member of the URJ since the mid '80s. It was the first congregation in a prison that was ever brought in as membership of the Reform movement. And the answer that swayed any negative was the fact that these people are always entitled to repent and do tshuva, even in prison. That if they had that power within them, Judaism says yes, that sense of repentance and forgiveness is always there. If you understand what you've done and accept what you've done and understand it, yes, repentance is there, and that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. So that's what the tradition means by that the gates of repentance are always open. So
Sheila is our last hand for now.
Sheila, unmute Sheila.
Okay, I did. Rabbi, this goes back to forgiving. This happened to me maybe 2 years ago. I was very good friends with a very dear friend of mine, and she kept saying something that I said something. So I said, well, okay, if I did, I am sorry. Then she turned around and said, well, I need space from you. She never said, I forgive, I accept your apology, but I haven't spoken to her in 2 years.
Yes. Sadly, I'm familiar with too many situations like that. And estrangement is a horrible thing because people are left in limbo, as if to say, well, just tell me what I did wrong, or how can we, and if you get no answer, it's like a wall that goes up.
Exactly.
And then resentment builds up inside of you, and the whole process is destroyed. And sometimes I've known people who reach out and say, look, this is wrong. Life is too short. And sometimes people respond like Jacob and Esau, and sometimes the wall goes up. And at that point, as we'll talk about over the holidays, there comes a point in a lot of this situation where for your own health, you have to let go.
I did.
So in Judaism,
we have a couple hands up, Rabbi. I don't know if you want to go to them or if you need to move on.
Let's take them real fast because then we're already going to run out of time. I can see.
Okay. We have Gail Greenfield, and then Felice put her hand up again.
Okay, Gail, take it away. Gail, wherever you are. I can't see you. But
Jody Stein.
Oh, there you are. There you are. You're in the bottom, but you're very dark there.
Yes,
Turn the light on. Turn a light on, Gail.
I have a light on. Anyway, it's Jody Seitlin visiting with Gail Greenfield, and we're anyway. So I have an experience, which is, first of all, I'm in recovery and have been for a number of years, and my recovery journey has taught me how to grow up.
Right.
A lot of things I didn't learn, and I just, for whatever reason. So on the issue of apologies and making amends, I have been taught a very wonderful method of how to clean up my side of the street. And I recently had occasion to write an amends letter to a stepsister who I've been estranged from for more than 25 years. And she lives on the other side of the country. So I sent it off and let it go, as I'd been taught to do. My mother recently passed, and this stepsister came back into my life because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long family story, which I won't go into, but my point was I was trying to reach out to her because there were things in the house that rightly belonged to her, and wanted to get them to her. So a third party was able to facilitate an email exchange. And I wrote to her and told her what I wanted to get to her, and I needed a mailing address and et cetera. And if I had been able to see her in person, I would have made the amends, and then I would have asked her if she had any other harms that she needed to tell me about, right? Is there anything else that you need to tell me about? And that part of my amends process, I couldn't because it wasn't face-to-face. So, and then I ended my note with, and if you want to set a boundary and not go there, I'll respect that. And so 4 days went by and I got back exactly what I had asked for. Of course, my mind went, oh my God, she's trying to tell me I'm toxic. I was toxic way back when. For good reason, she doesn't talk to me. But again, as has been said earlier, I'm not the same person I was then. But more importantly, my recovery program has taught me how to really take in what she did say, which was, I have found it's not healthy for me to engage with you since my father died.
Right.
And that makes me sad. But she also said, if my feelings change, I will let you know. So it sort of felt like a little
breakthrough,
window, a little breather, which I am so fine with. The other comment that was made earlier about shutting someone out, I have been taught that I shouldn't be explaining myself so much. I should seek to understand others rather than to make myself so understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an old acquaintance, an old friend who just wore me out. And I wrote her what I understood was a decent explanation for why I needed to take a break. The fact that she didn't read it or didn't believe it or wanted more out of me is not my problem.
Correct. And we'll hopefully get to some of that. But thank you for sharing that and hold on to that, because bits and pieces of what you're talking about, we're gonna circle back to. Felice, real fast, because I'm starting to be running out of time. But I can't hear you.
She put her hand down. You're okay, Felice? Okay, so we can move on.
Namaste, or whatever. Still don't know what that means. So, do you know what that means, by the way? I don't know what it means. I know I have a bunch of friends of mine that walk around saying namaste.
I think it's something like I see you.
Oh, okay. All right, whatever.
But maybe Jody and Gail know.
No. Well, let's not go there. Let's not go there now. All right, from the tradition, let's talk a little bit about how normative Jewish practice looks at this concept of forgiveness. And it's important to understand the concept of forgiveness and its places within the context of Judaism. There's a distinction between forgiveness and consequences. Lack of consequences is not synonymous with forgiveness, and negative consequences does not equate with lack of forgiveness. As in forgiving one's child for demonstrating carelessness or inconsideration while still holding that child accountable. We've all been there with raising kids. Rather, according to Jewish teaching, the essence of forgiveness is that the forgiver allows for his relationship with the forgiven to be healed. And it's a way of saying, quote, you have hurt, you have injured, you have wronged, and you will suffer the consequences. But despite all of that, I accept you, and I can still have a relationship with you. It's sort of like I forgive, but as somebody just said, I'm not necessarily ready to forget, but I can forgive what you did. And this forgiving and forgetting thing is a tension that some of you have already verbalized, but it appears in the tradition. Judaism teaches that the concept of forgiveness constitutes one of the most essential fundamentals of the human relationship with God and with each other. And in traditional Jewish approach, this should not surprise you, because everything is going to be modeled or based upon the fundamental relationship that we have. Go to Genesis chapter 1, the fundamental relationship that we have with God. How do we know this? Because we're created b'tselem Elohim, in the image and likeness of God. Thereby, by definition, this is the fundamental relationship within all of Jewish theology, regardless of the denomination. Whether you believe in a supernatural being or not, this concept of the sacred, of the holy, that's our fundamental relationship. Throughout the Bible, and we've talked a little bit about this, there are numerous examples of God forgiving human sin and humans forgiving their fellow beings. Furthermore, one of the basic principles of Jewish ethics is that humans are mandated to emulate the divine characteristics through which God relates to us. In other words, the God of compassion, the God of love. Now, this is all of this, as you know, that where this particular sentence breaks down is if you really, really study Torah, and you find that sometimes that God of love and that God of compassion, that God of mercy, if you really do that which God does not command you to do, will kill you. So there is a tension there. I can't lie to you. If you study the text, I mean, even the Torah portion that you studied this morning, for those of you who went to Torah study, if it's Deuteronomic, and the casuistic Deuteronomic liturgy is, if you follow my commandments, I love you, you'll have rains, everything will be blessed. If you happen to worship other gods, I'm basically going to kill you. And so there's this dichotomy, but the more sacred, compassionate aspects of God are the ones that come into this. Thus, just as God is kind, merciful, and forgiving, so too must we strive to do the same things in our own lives. And indeed, inasmuch as every human being is imperfect and needs the favor of forgiveness from God and from his fellows, Judaism's golden rule necessitates that we be prepared to grant others the very same favor that we expect from them. Remember, as we talked about on Wednesday night, our tradition does not believe by definition what is usually called original sin, that we are born sinful, more or less, that we are born imperfect, that there is no perfect human being, that perfection, according to classical, remember this is classical Jewish theology, is assigned to the Godhead. We are imperfect. That's why this book that I'm going to quote from later on from the recovery movement is called The Spirituality of Imperfection, which is it happens to be a great book, but it's a great title. Far from being just a necessary but regrettable allowance, Judaism teaches that the practice of forgiveness was divinely designed from the very outset of creation. Thus, the reason why God deliberately created us as imperfect is because through the process of sin and reconciliation, Yom Kippur, both the forgiver and the forgiven can experience tremendous personal and religious growth. That's a challenge. That's a challenge. So when Gail was talking about just a moment before that I'm not the same person as I was, or that Tom says, I'm not the same person now that I was back in prep school or college, that's exactly what that sentence is talking about. That as the liturgy will remind us on the holidays, Judaism is a civilization that empowers growth, spiritual growth. In fact, that's what these high holidays are about spiritual growth. It is common experience that when two people in a relationship are able to forgive one another for their flaws and offenses, this process draws them even closer than they would have been had the offenses never taken place. And that does happen. Sometimes people reach a reconciliation, not always, doesn't happen always, but sometimes people reach a reconciliation, and as a result of that dialogue, they become closer. I never knew that about you. I see something that I've never seen before. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's sometimes happen. And there are times like Jacob and Esau, where people will come together because time has changed things, and they agree that they'll never be close friends, but it's ridiculous to continue to have an estrangement and a grudge. This concept of forgiveness, rooted in our text, seeking to emulate the spiritual metaphor of God, that's exactly what this is about. This forgiveness concept is all about. And we go next to something that I wanted that grew out of Goldie's comment on Wednesday. And that when we talked about what we feel when we do the al-chet or the ashamnu. And are we really speaking to God, or are we really speaking to ourselves? Are we really asking ourselves, in a sense, to forgive ourselves, to self-forgive? Now, this is a quote from this is a high holiday book that many colleagues use. It's called "The Days of Awe Are Here and You're Not Prepared," which is a very, very good book. But the book itself is filled with, it's a spiritual book. It's a high, what I call a high holiday book. This is what colleagues will read as they prepare to just churn up their mind to get some ideas. And Rabbi Lou writes the following: self-forgiveness is the essential act of the High Holy Day season. That's why we need heaven. That's why we need God. We can forgive others on our own, but we turn to God, as a colleague he quotes reminds us, because we cannot forgive ourselves. We need to feel judged and accepted by a power who transcends our limited years and who embodies our highest values. When we wish to wipe the slate clean, to finalize self-forgiveness, we need heaven, a sense of something or someone larger and beyond ourself. I throw that out to you as a challenge. Self-forgiveness, in order to do that, according to Rabbi Lou in this book, and quoting another scholar, in order for that self-forgiveness to take place, we need a higher power. We need a power who transcends our limited years. Okay? We need to feel accepted and judged by this higher power. I throw that out to you as to react to. It's very much like children and parents, which, as you know, is locked into this God and children of Israel motif, because there are scholars who say God is nothing more than a projection of a parent, a cosmic parent. And we project that onto the God, into a Godhead. But we've all been in a situation with children, both raising children and when we were kids, when we screwed up. And we know we screwed up, but we need mommy or daddy to look at us and say, you did wrong, I forgive you. It's not enough for me to forgive myself. We need that validation from the outside. So I'll throw that out to you. How many of you agree with that? How many of you think that you really do need that outside validation that, yeah, before you can forgive yourself? You need that. Yep, you did it. You did it. Anybody?
Tom. Oh, Marilyn. It's switched.
Marilyn. Wherever you are, Marilyn.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. I think that people, in a way, the idea of forgiving yourself when you've done whatever you can to make amends is probably perhaps a more reaching adulthood.
Ah, what do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes probably everyone, I certainly know a couple of people who can chew on something forever. And whether it's something that someone did to them, or, oh, I wish I hadn't done it that way. I wish I could do a rerun. I wish. And sometimes after it's something that someone else can forgive you for, then that's easier to do. But sometimes it's almost harder for some people to forgive themselves, and they need something else to have it happen. But I think forgiving yourself should be possible too.
Yeah. I wanted to throw that because this idea of, do we really need that outside power, like we need a parent, or can we do this? But I like the idea, this is part of the understanding of our own growth in adulthood, and accepting responsibility, which we're going to get to in a minute, because that's also part of this process. Anybody else, Cantor?
Yeah, we go back over to Tom now.
Tom.
Quickly, if you have to forgive yourself before you can forgive other people. I mean, if you don't forgive yourself, because coming and forgiving yourself means that you start to believe that you can and will do better. And then you can go and ask other people for forgiveness because you feel that now you can forgive another person. I had to bring this up. I brought it up soon, but it's funny in a 12-step program, you talk about higher power. One of the steps is after you kind of look at your life and you see some faults, you admit to God, yourself, and then say another human being, the exact nature of what your wrongs are. And I always thought it was funny. I learned a few years ago when I heard that, I said, the order in which it's put in, the order in which it's in, doesn't start with you have to, you don't start admitting to yourself. It's first you have to admit to God, to maybe some sort of outside power,
right?
What it is. And then that helps you to be more self-aware and then you can actually go and admit to another human being that you've been wrong. Only last thing I want to say, there's this famous writer, Christian writer, C.S. Lewis.
Right.
And in The Great Divorce, he writes at one point, he says, the great joke of heaven is we were wrong. Okay, thank you.
You will find, though, by the way, that I've had people who've gone through 12 steps and they will look at some of the liturgy and construct of some of the prayers around Yom Kippur, and they will find resonance in that. Anybody else, Cantor?
No hands.
Okay, so I want to turn now. Okay, we're in good shape. To this book called The Spirituality of Imperfection, by Kurtz and Ketchum. It's a paperback. It's all, my pages are all torn up and it's brown. I've had it for about 25 years. But they have a section on forgiveness. And it really, when I was researching for tonight, I really liked this. And I wanted to bring it to your attention because we've shared a little bit of personal stories. We've taken a look at some of the classic Jewish theological framework of what it means to forgive. We've touched a little bit on this self-forgiveness and this idea that even in Judaism, there's this concept that in order for really to forgive ourselves, we need this validation from some outside or higher power. And these two scholars talk about issues of resentment and responsibility in forgiveness. And they mention the fact, and this is like people who hold on to something. I'm fascinated, and we'll talk about this on Yom Kippur. I'm fascinated by this tension of what people hold on to and what they have the courage to let go of. And in Maryland, that's really part of becoming an adult in many ways. So there's a concept that they write about, and I really wanted to bounce it off of you, of this sense of resentment that becomes a spiritual disease. They call it the poison of a spiritual life. And they tell the following story. They quote this following story. Listen to this story. I bet you it will resonate with some of you, because just from some of the things that you have shared already, well, just listen. It's a little story. A former inmate of a Nazi concentration camp was visiting a friend who had shared the same ordeal with him. Have you forgiven the Nazis? He asked his friend. Yes. Well, I haven't. I'm still consumed with hatred for them. In that case, his friend said quietly, they still have you in prison. It's a great little story, but it talks about this, what they're calling resentment, that stuff that people will hold on to. I guarantee you there's 41 people on this call. 41 of us have had this experience with either ourselves or somebody else, that you'll sit and have a cup of coffee with them, if you remember those days, and they say, I just can't let go of that. You say, well, then they still are controlling you. They still are controlling you. This is part of anger and the power that anger has over us, especially when it comes to human relationships and the ability to forgive. And this idea of resentment, there's again this wonderful word we talked about on Wednesday night, jumels. It just rumbles around within our soul and our gut, and it's a disease. It can make you sick. It can make literally, physically, and emotionally sick. The opposite of resentment, they suggest, is forgiveness. The opposite of resentment is forgiveness, recognized by centuries of spiritual thinkers as the end point of human life. This idea of, and this is very difficult. I don't want to even to minimize this. I mean, we throw out, oh, just say you're sorry, as if that's all you need to do. And again, this is one of the whole points of Yom Kippur, that you just can't say you're sorry. Because remember, we'll talk about this at the beginning of Kol Nidre. This is for sins between man and God. Yom Kippur atones. For the sins between people, Yom Kippur does not atone. You have to make amends. You have to seek somebody out, as we talked about on Wednesday night. This is a very, very powerful, and it's extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. A lot of times in our society, somebody says, "Oh, just say you're sorry," as if that equates everything. But it doesn't. It's that pencil motif that I told you about Wednesday night. You can say you're sorry, but unless you understand why and where, and that then is joined by action, real intuitive action, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. That's part of what Yom Kippur, that's part of what's starting now. That's part of the conversations with our soul. That forgiveness, it is a transfer, it can be, and look, the people write, forgiveness can be a transformational act involving life. But some of you've already validated what they're writing. You've already said that this act of making amends or seeking forgiveness or seeking a rapprochement with somebody who has hurt you was transformational. It's a part of growth. It's part of spiritual growth. It's not always easy. It's not always positive. It doesn't always end like in Hollywood with the waves crashing and the violins coming up and everybody embracing and riding off into the sunset together. No, like Jacob and Esau, it sometimes says, look, I really don't like you. You don't really like me. We screwed up together. We're going to agree to disagree and let's move on. We're seeing that now played out in family systems about politics. We are seeing that right now. I cannot tell you how many times in the last 4 years, this is not rabbinic hyperbole, that I've been engaged with conversation with people, some friends of mine, who say, Richie, I can't talk to my cousin. We sat down at Thanksgiving and the ground rule was, you can pass the turkey. You can say the stuffing is horrible. The green bean casserole has too many French's onion rings on it. You can say anything but please don't. And I've been told that at least 2 or 3 times by friends of mine going to a dinner as late as last Thanksgiving, actually. Just don't talk politics, because if you open that door, people will go. And I know people who just stop talking to relatives and have lost friends over this. If this was a sermon, we would now talk about the fact that we've lost the ability to have civil discourse in the United States of America. And that's a whole other, it's a sermon you're not getting tonight, but I guarantee you many colleagues will preach on it this high holidays, because we've lost the ability to sit down and say, listen, I think I don't agree with anything you say politically. I care about you. You're a friend of mine. This is what I believe. This is what you believe. And we can talk. We're going to have to figure out a way to talk about it sensibly, like grown-ups, not like kids. You know, I'll take my bat and ball and go home, but we'll have to talk about it civilly. We've lost a lot of that, and that's to our detriment. Part of this conversation also deals with this idea of responsibility and letting go. They write, to forgive, truly to forgive, involves letting go of the feeling of resentment and of the vision that underlies that feeling, the vision in which we see ourselves as being offended against, the vision of self as victim. It's a very important, because sometimes when we feel we're being offended, we immediately, some people go to play the victim. Aha, they're against me. No matter what I say, they're against me. And there are people, you may know people like this, that's the identity that they love. They love to play the victim, no matter what happens. That's their identity. They'll never admit it, but they like to play the victim. That's part of this pathology, okay? As in all matters relating to the spiritual, focusing on feeling distracts from a more profound and truly important issue, the actuality of being. The core of resentment is less a feeling than the seeing of oneself as being a victim. To see self as victim is to adopt a worldview in which forgiveness becomes impossible. If you see yourself as a victim, and no matter what this person says, the deflective shields will be up, because that's your identity. That's where you find, because there's a certain amount of growth, as some of you have said already, there's a certain sense of growth that comes through the act of forgiveness. It can be a transitional and transformational act. The main spiritual shift that takes place in the event of being forgiven or forgiving is thus a new experience of self. Blaming others falls away, and we begin to accept primary responsibility for who we are. Forgiveness comes when we let go of the feeling of resentment by surrendering the vision of self as victim. It's a great sentence. So when we let go of the feeling of resentment, the world's against me, they hate me, they're doing this to me, and surrender the vision of the self as victim, this implies a spiritual growth. This implies the ability to grow as a human being. And that's not easy for a lot of people. It's not easy. Forgiveness, as you're seeing in the tradition, it's a lot more than just saying, I'm sorry. Forgiving is not the same thing as forgetting. That's a very important aspect. Letting go of the past is not some kind of erasure. Forgiveness is not an attempt to obliterate the past or wipe the slate clean. That is a very important concept out of our tradition. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. I can forgive someone's action against me. Doesn't mean I'm going to forget it. Because if I forget it, I may envelop the circumstances to allow that same thing to happen again. But if I don't forget, and if I see us walking down that same path again, I can say, you know something, we've been down this road before, and we know what happens. So we have to stop. Sometimes that's in a relationship. Who knows? But that's a very important sentence. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. Letting go of the past is not some kind of erasure. Forgiveness is not an attempt to obliterate the past or wipe the slate clean. To forgive and forget means to throw away dearly bought experiences. You don't forget. Sometimes the culture sometimes says, you know, forgive and forget. It's all, but the truth is, you know, from your own life experience, your own experience, each one of our lives, you just don't forget. So part of the challenge in forgiveness is to take perhaps that hurt and place it and find a place for it, some place in your soul, so that you don't forget it. Because it's part of who we are as a human being. And we are imperfect. No one's perfect. And everybody is going to mess up, right? Wednesday night, the pencil. I mess up. Okay. I erase it. I redo it. Hopefully I'll learn why I made that mistake. Why I made the mistake. So this idea of forgiveness and responsibility. In one of the workshops that we do as part of my Jewish sacred aging work is on caregiving. We have a long workshop on the art of caregiving, and we trace it through Jewish tradition. And one of the responses that we teach is an essay by a professor at the Hebrew Union College, Michael Chernick. I don't know whether, Carrie, you had Michael as a professor. He's freakingly brilliant. So he wrote an essay on the fifth commandment of honoring your father and your mother. And in the back of the essay, as he unpacks some of the traditional texts, and we teach this in the workshop, is he raises the question of, well, wait a minute, does a parent who has been violent, abusive, physically, emotionally abusive, abandoning a child, does that parent still carry with them the responsibility on the part of the adult child to honor and respect them? And the answer that Chernick comes up with is no, they do not. That if someone violates Torah law, violates all the moral and ethical aspects of Judaism, they abrogate the commandment of the fifth commandment to honor and respect. So this concept of responsibility goes a variety of different ways. We have a couple of hands up according to the carry, and they are?
We have Miriam has a hand up.
Miriam, where are you? Wherever she is.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hi, Rabbi.
Where are you?
Hi. I don't have a video. I'm sorry. I just have a question about Lishon Hara. That is part of the, the repentance in Yom Kippur. So should that be forgiven, any circumstances, or should that be depending if it impacted someone's life tremendously, detrimenting it? In that matter.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you on a phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Lashon Hara, which is gossip.
Yes.
Right. And which is a major issue right now, because you can actually, in fact, one of the interpretations of the commandment about not committing a murder is through the use of gossip. And with social media, we do have people who are being killed reputation-wise, and either people committing suicide because of Lashon Hara. So to seek forgiveness by hurting somebody by word is a major act. And you'll see on the Yom Kippur liturgy and all the new prayer books, that will be one of the modern sins. The sin of gossip, the sin of Lashon Hara, the sin of hurting somebody by word of mouth, by what you say. You know, there's this wonderful old, okay, we have 5 minutes. we have this wonderful old midrash that I'm sure you've been taught, because every rabbi I know has taught this midrash about, somebody comes to the rabbi. There's always, in every one of these stories, it's an old rabbi. They never come to like a 30-year-old rabbi. They always come to like an old rabbi, and they say about gossip and how horrible it is. And the rabbi says, take a pillow and rip the pillow apart. And what happens is, well, the wind takes all the feathers, and then the rabbi says, okay, now go pick up all the feathers. And they say, well, I can't pick up all the feathers. They're scattered all over the wind. They said, aha, because aha. They said, now you understand what the power of words are, because once you say them, you have to be careful what you say. We're living in a political society where that is true every single day. So that midrash is being played out every single day. So you're right, Amir. The lashon hara is a potential of great evil.
Thank you.
Next is Goldie.
So I understand the concept of forgive but don't forget. But then I run into a tension between I have not forgotten and now I have like a coat of armor on when I'm around you, because I'm fearful that we're going to go down that bad road again.
Right. Yes, that's part of the fact that we are imperfect human beings, and it's very dicey, and it can affect relationships. And we all know people who've been in that situation, and they walk into a dinner party or they walk into the Oneg Shabbat, and the deflector shields go up. And you say, I have to be careful what I say, because I don't want something to be misinterpreted, especially in this environment. And yes, that's
so the relationship becomes awkward, rather than repaired.
Yes, the relationship can remain awkward. That's part of life. I mean, ideally, if this was the movies, Goldie, everything, you just say the magic word and everything would be love, and it'd be a Hallmark movie. But the problem with the Hallmark movies is it's a movie, and very rarely is it real. Very, very few are all problems solved in an hour and a half with commercials. Yes, we've all been in very awkward situations when people will seek forgiveness, but you'll do your best to stay away from that environment. And sometimes people put themselves in the position of going into a social situation where they know they're going to be dealing with people who they've had issues with, even though they've had some sort of rapprochement. That is part of life. And there's nothing.
I wanted you to have a better answer.
I'm sorry. Listen, if I had all the answers, I would be, on Oprah and rocking and rolling. But,
we're glad to have you. It's okay.
But Goldie, sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer to all this stuff is, that really is not, it's not good. And we just have to learn to deal with it. Life, deals us all kinds of cards. And part of as Marilyn was alluding to, part of the challenge of growing older and maturing, as my mom used to say, is we just sometimes have to learn to deal with the cards that we're dealt sometimes, even though it doesn't always turn out right. Look, remember, we used to tell our kids the same thing. They would come home and scream and yell, it's not fair, it's not fair. And what did we say?
You're right.
Life isn't fair. And we're imperfect. And there is no perfection. Okay, we're almost time to light a candle. So I'm going to close with another Alden Solavi poem. This is from his book called...
I don't know, we have one hand left. Is that okay, or?
Oh, sure, it's fine with me. I mean,
okay.
It's dark in New Jersey. I don't know whether it's dark in Florida yet.
It's dark in Florida, but we have, Felice has her hand up. So
all right,
we'll
Felice,
go
you
to
have
one
30 seconds to beat the clock, if you remember that show. But you're on mute, Felice. All right.
Got it. I'm putting on my New York accent and talking really fast.
Okay.
So thank you. It's about, first of all, thank you, Rabbi. This is so powerful and wonderful and important. And the question I have is regarding honoring one's father and mother. I have read other places, and I can't remember at the moment, but that even if your parents were terrible, you can honor them because they gave you life. It doesn't mean you have to love them. And I'm interested in your comments on that. And thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. You know, that always happens. This always happens. Let's ask a question as the time ends. That's really the Art of Caregiving workshop is about a 2.5-hour workshop in which we answer that question, but not to blow you off. The answer to your question is yes. And when we do the workshop, and hopefully one day we'll have the time, maybe if you're interested, we'll do it for you guys. When I ask lay people, when we do this in congregations, I say, you're commanded in the Torah, the 5th commandment, to honor, and you're commanded to respect. Kabed and tir'u. What are you not commanded to do? You're not commanded to love. Love has to be earned. And that's why the Chernik article that I referred to is so important. So, you know, so when that parent comes to that 65-year-old after 20 years and says, you know, I'm really down on my luck, I'm getting sick, I'm all alone, I need you to take care of me. And you say, wait a minute. And they go to the rabbi and say, you mean to tell me that no good SOB who abused me, who beat up my mother, who abandoned me when I was a teenager, when I really needed, do you mean to tell me now, 30 years later, I got to take care of this no good SOB? And the Chernik response is, no, you don't. If you wish to honor that commandment, that's your choice. But in truth, actions have consequences. And that person abrogated their right to honor and respect. You may choose to do that. And I know people, and the cantor knows people who have chosen to do that. They say, look, I'll find you a place at, you know, Shady Acres, but that's it. Don't bother me. Or they'll say, no, you made this bed. Don't come to me now 30 years later. And this is why this is a very, very powerful, that honor and respect thing is because every single one of us have lived it. And if we haven't, we're going to get a chance. The text on this, Felice, are magnificent. They are brilliant. So I'm going to close with this poem. This is from Alden's book, This Grateful Heart. This is from the CCAR Press. And he writes this poem about forgiveness. And I think it's a nice, so I opened with him. I just want to close and thank you again for sharing and your honesty and your openness. This is great. It makes for great teaching. And I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you after Havdalah. You'll go on the link. Carrie will tell you how to get there. And I'll see you hopefully next Friday night at 8 p.m. This is what he writes, Forgiveness Inside. This I confess. I have locked forgiveness away, hiding its wonder and grace in a secret spot deep in my heart. I have set myself up as a judge and accuser, as provocateur and jury, regarding my own words and deeds, my wisdom and my truth, with loathing and with disdain. I have known forgiveness from God, but not from myself. God of redemption, with your loving and guiding hand, seeking forgiveness is easy. Accepting forgiveness is a struggle. In your wisdom, you have given me this choice, to live a life of condemnation or to set my heart free to love you, to love your people, and to love myself. Great line. God of mercy, help me to leave my judgments behind, to hear your voice, to accept your guidance, and to see the miracles in each new day. Blessed are you, God of righteousness. In your wisdom, you have taught that forgiveness is the road to peace. Amen. That's a great meditation, and really encapsulates everything that we've said in the last hour. So we move now to Havdalah. Cantor, Barry, and we've at great expense. I've employed a volunteer assistant. My wife, Jane, who dressed especially for this amazing, she put on her havdah.
I put a necklace on. In quarantine, who wears anything, right?
Well, no, don't say that. I mean, you do wear things.
I meant you.
Don't get the wrong idea. I know it's New Jersey, but. All right, Carrie.
You can't see me blushing, but I'm blushing.
This Havdalah, you know, revolves around 3 sacred symbols. I asked Jane to hold the candle. Candle, the intertwined candle, this symbol really of community. And even though we're virtual on Zoom, we still have a community. The fire, the light of God, the light of Torah, the light of learning, and especially now the light of forgiveness and the light leading us to a new year, the spice box. This is symbolic in the tradition of what they call the neshama yetera, the additional soul. According to Jewish tradition, on Shabbat we get a second soul. It's a little foretaste of the world to come. And so when we shake the spice box and smell, in this case, clove and cinnamon, it's a reminder of the sweetness of Shabbat, the sweetness of all that it brings together in this intertwined community. And finally, the wine, the traditional symbol of life. And at the end, as you know, we take all of this, the light and the fire and community, and we place it in the wine cup, not as something destructive, but as something powerful, because it unites all of us in life, the intertwinedness of a community combining with life and the sweetness of our soul. And for this, we wish you in this coming week the most happy and the most healthy of all New Years. Cantor?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen ay lay la 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 lay la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim lay lay la 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 lay 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 la 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 lay lay ya la lay 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 ya la lay ya la lay ya lay la 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 lay lay ya lay la 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 lay lay ya la la lay 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 ya la lay ya la lay Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei me'orei ha'ish borei me'orei ha'ish lay lay la 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 lay 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 la 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 lay lay la la lay 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 la lay la lay 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 la 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 lay lay la 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 lay lay la la lay 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 la lay la lay Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המבדיל בין קודש לחול, המבדיל בין קודש לחול. המבדיל בין קודש לחול, חטאותינו ימחול. זרענו וכספנו ירבה כחול, וככוכבים בלילה. שבוע טוב, 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 שבוע טוב. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera v'yamenu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi.
Shavua tov, Shavua tov. Thank you, Cantor.
See you next week.
Yes. Stay healthy now.
Pray for the plane.
Yes. Mary Ellen is going to give me my host powers back. And then I am going to share my screen so that everybody can see where to go on the website. So here we are. Give me one moment. We're going to, I should probably, I can just go to my desktop. Here we go. Okay. All right, everybody. Actually, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to go to thetemplejacksonville.org. That is our website. You're going to go to thetemplejacksonville.org, and if you go there, you're going to see High Holy Day greetings from Rabbi and Jane and from me and Michelle Penson. But if you go just below, there's a block here that says click here to visit our High Holidays page. We're going to click the High Holidays page. And here we are, Holidays 5781. Every one of our holidays is on here. You see the Elul Education Series, Selichot, Rosh Hashanah, all the way down to the end. Anything that you need for the holidays will be there. Tonight, you're going to go into Selichot. And in Selichot, we just had our teaching at 7, our Havdalah service. And right here, the Selichot service, we're going to click here. And you'll be treated to the ACC, CCAR, and URJ presentation of Selichot from around the country with many of our movements, rabbis and cantors. It is beautiful, and I know you will love it. So I hope that made sense to everybody, but I can take questions if you have any. Put your blue hand up now. Otherwise...
Yeah, we'll stick around till 8:30. And remember, Wednesday night is the last of the Elul Education Series with Rabbi Simcha Raphael, who's the leading expert on memory and Judaism in the afterlife. And he'll be teaching the class on Wednesday night. So if you're concerned about where you're going, he can probably tell you. He's not giving away coupons, or there's like, but anyway. That's the thing. We're supposedly American Airlines willing flying down. So if I'm late to that class, it only means that I have to find my way from the airport to the Residence Inn on Deerwood Boulevard or Road or Park. But it's off of Butler. I don't know. Butler to Deerwood. We'll get there. If not, you'll send up a flare.
It's near 95.
Yeah,
GPS is a beautiful thing.
Yes. I'm an old Jewish man who asked for directions.
I think positive. We're good.
Anybody have any, want to follow up on anything from the Havdalah, Ask the Cantor, anything, any technical stuff? She'll be more than happy to answer. Mary Ellen will. If not, as they say in the trade, talk amongst yourselves.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and unmute then. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And it was
Thank
so
you
good
so
to
much,
see you,
Cantor.
Dana.
Mary Ellen, nice to see you.
Hey, I think
Rabbi
I'm ready
and
to
Jane.
click. I
A
think I
wonderful
followed
trip.
it.
Okay. Now.
Rabbi and Jane, safe travel and have fun. We can't wait to see you here.